In the waning hours of night, when the moon's pale gaze slipped through the high, narrow windows of the palace, Og, king of Bashan, stirred in his slumber. His chamber was a cavernous vault, hewn from basalt and dressed in the spoils of 100 conquered cities. The air was thick with the scent of incense, myrrh, and the lingering musk of feasts long past. Shadows pooled in the corners, deep and ancient, as if the darkness itself remembered the days when giants walked the earth. Upon a dais of black stone, Og's bed loomed a monstrous thing of iron, forged in the days when men still whispered of the Rapayim. 13.5 feet from head to foot, 6 feet across, it was more sarcophagus than couch, a relic and a warning. The iron gleamed dully in the lamplight, etched with the scars of age and battle. At its foot, 3 servant girls slept in a tangle of linen and exhaustion, their forms small and fragile against the immensity of the king's resting place. They were as silent as the dead, their presence a testament to the order of things in Bashan, the mighty and the meek, the master and the servant, each in their appointed place. Og's chest rose and fell like the slow breathing of a mountain. His limbs, thick as the trunks of ancient oaks, sprawled across the iron bed. His skin was marked by the passage of century scars, burns, and the faded sigils of forgotten victories. His hair, black streaked with iron gray, spilled across the pillow like a river of night. Even in repose, there was a weight to him, a sense of power coiled and waiting. Tonight, however, sleep was a shallow sea. Og's eyes flickered open, pupils wide and black as obsidian. He listened to the silence, to the distant hush of wind in the palace gardens, to the faint, nervous breathing of his servants. For the first time in generations, he felt the pulse of excitement and old, half-forgotten thrill that set his heart to pounding. He had been bored for centuries, dulled by the endless cycle of tribute and submission. No mortal kingdom dared challenge him. No hero had crossed his borders in living memory. But now, at the edge of his domain, a new rumor had come. A nation of slaves, led by a prophet, bearing tales of miracles and a God who walked with them in cloud and fire. Og rose from his bed like a mountain roused from slumber. The iron frame groaned beneath his weight, and the stone dais trembled. Dust sifted from the high arches, swirling in the lamplight. The servant girls startled awake, shrinking back as the giant king swung his legs over the side of the bed. His feet, broad as shields, struck the flagstones with a sound like distant thunder. He stood, stretching to his full height, his head nearly brushing the carved beams overhead. The chamber seemed to shrink around him, its grandeur diminished by the scale of its master. Og's presence filled the room, a living monument to an age when giants ruled and men cowered in their shadows. He moved with deliberate slowness, savoring the sensation of power in his limbs. Each step sent shivers through the palace, rattling the bronze lamps and stirring the tapestries. The servants scurried to their feet, bowing low, eyes averted. Og regarded them with a mixture of amusement and contempt. To them, he was a force of nature unquestioned, unchallenged, eternal. But tonight, something had changed. The reports from his scouts had set his blood alight. A nation of runaway slaves, hardened by the desert, was approaching Bashan's borders. They spoke of wonders, a sea split in two, an empire humbled, an army drowned in the depths. Their leader, Moses, was said to wield the power of a god who fought for the lowly and the outcast. Og's lips curled in a slow, predatory smile. At last, a worthy challenge. At last, a test fit for a king of giants. As Og strode through the corridors of his palace, his mind wandered through the corridors of memory. He recalled the days when the Rapayim were many, when the sons of Anak and the Nephilim walked the high places of the land. He remembered the wars against the Anakim, the Amim, the Zamzamim tribes of giants, now dust and legend. He alone remained, the last of his kind, a living relic of a world that had passed away. Men feared him. Nations skirted his borders, paying tribute rather than risking his wrath. His cities Ashtaroth, Edrei, Salka were ringed with walls and iron gates, their granaries full, their people fat and content. Bashan was a land of plenty, its pastures rich, its forests deep. The cattle of Bashan were famed throughout the world, and the oaks of Bashan stood tall against the sky. Yet for all his power, Og felt the slow rot of decadence creeping through his kingdom. The feasts grew longer, the pleasures more jaded. The priests devised ever more elaborate rituals to stave off boredom and death. The people whispered of omens and portents, of strange lights in the sky and the approach of a new age. Og watched it all with a mixture of disdain and weariness. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had outlived his enemies and his friends. Only the challenge of battle, the taste of danger, could stir him from his ennui. Now, as he prepared for war, Og felt the old hunger returning, a hunger for glory, for struggle, for the chance to prove himself against a foe worthy of his strength. The king's private chamber was a monument to excess. Pillars of black basalt rose to a vaulted ceiling, their surfaces inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli. Tapestries woven with scenes of conquest and revelry hung from the walls, their colors faded by smoke and time. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, frankincense, myrrh, and the bitter tang of burnt offerings. At the center of the room, a great bronze basin stood upon the backs of 4 lions. Servants poured water scented with rose and cedar, steam rising in fragrant clouds. Og stepped into the basin, the water swirling around his massive frame. Attendants scrubbed his skin with pumice and oil, their hands trembling as they worked. They anointed him with unguents myrrh for strength, cinnamon for courage, cassia for favor with the gods. The oils gleamed on his skin, catching the light and turning his flesh to bronze. The king's armor awaited him on a marble plinth, a cuirass of hammered iron, chased with images of bulls and lions, greaves and vambraces studded with bronze, a helmet adorned with the horns of a wild ox. The armor was scarred and battered, each dent a memory of battles won and foes slain. It had been forged for a giant, its weight alone enough to crush an ordinary man. Og donned the armor piece by piece, feeling the familiar embrace of iron and leather. The servants fastened the straps, their fingers nimble and practiced. When at last he stood fully arrayed, he was a vision of ancient power, a titan clad for war, a living god among mortals. In the shadowed halls beyond the king's chamber, the priests of Bashan gathered. They wore robes of crimson and black, their faces painted with ash and ochre. They chanted in the old tongue, voices rising and falling in a cadence older than memory. The air was thick with the smoke of incense, frankincense, myrrh, cannabis, and other strange herbs. Og entered the ritual chamber, the priests bowing low before him. At the center of the room, a brazier burned with a blue-green flame, its smoke curling in hypnotic patterns. The priests circled the king, sprinkling him with water and oil, invoking the names of forgotten gods. They sang of strength and victory, of the blood of enemies and the favor of the divine. The king knelt before the altar, breathing deeply of the incense-laden air. The smoke filled his lungs, clouding his mind, opening the doors of vision. Colors danced before his eyes, red and gold, black and silver. He saw himself as a colossus, striding across the world, his enemies crushed beneath his feet. He heard the voices of his gods, whispering promises of triumph and immortality. He felt invincible, chosen, destined for greatness. The priests brought forth a cup of wine, dark as blood, laced with the sap of the poppy and the resin of the mandrake. Og drank, the bitter liquid burning his throat. The world spun and shifted, the boundaries between flesh and spirit dissolving. He saw the armies of Bashan raid before him, their banners snapping in the wind. He saw the faces of his enemies, fearful, desperate, doomed. He saw, too, a pillar of cloud rising in the east, luminous and terrible. Within the cloud, a presence moved, vast, unknowable, holy. Og shuddered, but the vision passed, leaving only the echo of awe and a flicker of fear. As the night deepened, the palace came alive with the sounds of feasting. Tables groaned beneath the weight of roasted meats, honeyed fruits, and loaves of bread. Goblets overflowed with wine and beer. Musicians played on lyres and drums, their melodies weaving through the laughter and the shouts of warriors. Og presided over the feast, his presence dominating the hall. He ate and drank with abandon, tearing meat from the bone, draining goblets in a single draught. His warriors toasted him, their voices rising in a chorus of loyalty and bravado. The priests moved among them, blessing the food and the drink, invoking the favor of the gods. Yet beneath the revelry, there was an undercurrent of tension. The rumors of the approaching Israelites had spread, and even the bravest warriors felt the weight of uncertainty. Og watched them with a keen eye, measuring their courage, their resolve. He knew that fear was a weapon, as potent as any sword or spear. He rose to his feet, towering above the assembly. The hall fell silent. Og raised his goblet, his voice echoing from the stone walls. Tonight, we feast as kings. Tomorrow, we fight as gods. Let the world remember the might of Bashan, and let our enemies tremble before us. The warriors roared their approval, the sound rolling through the palace like thunder. As dawn approached, the sky over Bashan turned the color of old blood. A chill wind swept through the palace, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of war. Og stood at the gates, his armor gleaming in the half-light. His warriors assembled around him, giants in their own right, though none matched the king in stature or strength. The army of Bashan was a fearsome sight. Ranks of spearmen and archers, chariots drawn by massive horses, banners snapping in the wind. The ground shook beneath their feet, the earth itself seeming to recoil from their advance. Og led them forth, his stride long and unhurried, each step a declaration of power. As they marched, the people of Bashan lined the roads, watching in awe and fear. Mothers clutched their children, old men bowed their heads. The king's shadow fell across them all, a reminder of the ancient covenant between ruler and ruled. At the head of the column, Og's standard-bearer carried the banner of Bashan, a black bull on a field of red, the symbol of strength and dominion. The priests walked beside the king, chanting prayers and scattering incense. The warriors sang of glory and vengeance, their voices rising in a battle hymn that echoed across the plain. The army halted at the outskirts of Edrei, the principal city of Bashan. The walls of the city loomed behind them, a last redoubt against the coming storm. Before them stretched the plain, empty save for the distant glimmer of the Israelite camp. Og surveyed the field, his eyes narrowing. He saw the tents of the Israelites, arrayed in orderly ranks. He saw the pillar of cloud rising above them, luminous and strange. He felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him, the sense that this day would be remembered for generations. His captains gathered around him, their faces grim. Scouts brought reports. The Israelites were many, but poorly armed. Their leader, Moses, was said to be old, but his God was feared. The tales of miracles had spread like wildfire, of the Red Sea parted, of Egypt humbled, of armies drowned in the depths. Og listened with fascination, not fear. He wondered what kind of God fought for slaves. He hungered to see this God with his own eyes, to test his strength against the divine. For the first time in centuries, he felt the stirrings of doubt, a flicker of uncertainty that gnawed at the edges of his confidence. He whispered the name of his adversary, Moses. The word tasted strange on his tongue, heavy with meaning. As the sun rose, the pillar of cloud grew brighter, its form shifting and alive. It hovered above the Israelite camp, a sign of presence and protection. Og felt its gaze upon him, cold and inexorable. He sensed a power unlike any he had known, a power that was not of this world. The priests of Bashan trembled, their chants faltering. The warriors shifted uneasily, their bravado fading. Og stood alone at the front of his army, his heart pounding. He felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon him, the legacy of the Rephaim, the pride of giants, the futility of mortal strength. For the first time in his long life, Og felt fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of the unknown, the fear of facing a God who could split the sea and humble empires. He squared his shoulders, lifting his great spear. He would not flee. He would not beg for mercy. He was Og, king of Bashan, last of the giants. He would meet his fate with open eyes. The armies faced each other across the plain, the air thick with anticipation. The Israelites stood in silence, their faces turned toward the pillar of cloud. The warriors of Bashan shifted restlessly, their armor clinking, their eyes fixed on their king. Og stepped forward, his shadow stretching long across the earth. The ground trembled beneath his feet. He raised his spear, the iron tip glinting in the morning light. He looked to the east, to the pillar of cloud, and felt the presence within it, a presence vast and holy, beyond comprehension. He whispered the name again, Moses. He smiled, a slow, fierce smile. At last, a worthy opponent. At last, a battle fit for a king. Og took the final step, crossing the boundary between legend and eternity. He went forth to meet the living God in battle, his heart alight with hope and dread. So ended the last moments of Og, king of Bashan. His name would be remembered in song and story, a symbol of pride and power brought low. His iron bed would stand as a relic, a reminder of the days when giants walked the earth. The land of Bashan would pass to new hands, its cities and fields given to those who had once been slaves. But in the memory of the world, the shadow of Og would linger, a testament to the folly of strength without wisdom, to the fleeting nature of power, and to the enduring mystery of the divine.